ILL of you camp at the exit. Naturally, there was more danger awaiting the one who searched inside the building because of the higher chance he would encounter an enemy. Brain S strength far surpassed Climb S, so it made sense for him to do it. Then we all set for our final preparations, right? Sebas asked. They had discussed a rough strategy on the way over, but there had been certain things they couldn't decide without seeing the place. Now that they decided, there were no objections. Sebas took a step forward toward the thick metal door. Climb would never be able to open it, but to Sebas, it looked as flimsy as a piece of paper. Only a single man was going to assault the front gate, the most highly guarded area. There was no need to worry. Brain Unglaus said he was stronger than both him and Gazov Stronov put together. The only word to describe him was exceptional. Okay then, let us go. For that entrance, according to the man, 4 knocks in a row signal friendliness. Not that you've forgotten it, but just in case. Thank you. He hadn't forgotten, but Climb thanked Sebas. Then I'll be taking prisoners to the extent possible, but if I meet resistance I am planning to kill without mercy. Are there any problems with that? Sebas was smiling kindly, but Climb S and Brain S spines both froze. It was an utterly normal approach to the situation, not wrong in any way. They both thought they'd do the same under similar circumstances. What sent the fear creeping up their backs was the sense that Sebas had a dual personality. He was an extremely tender gentleman and a hard-boiled warrior. Extremes of both generosity and heartlessness coexisted within him. If they let him go in without comment, it was possible he'd kill every last person in the place. Climb nervously addressed him. We should try to keep needless loss of life to a minimum. We're outnumbered, so some casualties can be helped. But if there is anyone who seems like one of the 8 Fingers executives, could you please do everything you can to restrain them? If we can catch and interrogate them, we can reduce the harm they can cause in the future. I am no fan of murder. It's not as if I came here to kill everyone, so never you fear. His gentle smile was a relief to Climb. Then please excuse me. Shall we get going? All right then. Let us annihilate them all at once here to buy some time. If they crushed this brothel, the thugs would stop interfering with Sebas, at least temporarily. If they were lucky enough to get a hold of top-secret documents, the 8 Fingers might put so much effort into dealing with that, they could very well forget about Tsuya completely. Worst case, Sebas would buy some time and create a chance for her to escape, or he might find some better way to handle things. There was that kind merchant who reached out to me in Rantel. I wonder if I could enlist his help. Even if Tsuya recovered mentally, she would still probably be happier if she had someone she could trust. Sebas faced the thick iron door once more. Remembering how Tsuya had been tossed out here, he touched the massive door of iron-plated wood. A glance was enough to tell it wouldn't break down easily without some tools. I wonder if Climb will be all right. He didn't feel he needed to worry about Brain Unglaus. Even if Brain fought Sakurant, Sebas felt he had a good chance of winning. But not Climb. Climb had very little experience. He was the one who offered his cooperation in storming the brothel, so he was surely ready for whatever would happen. Still, Sebas thought that losing his good, young life would be a waste. I'd like that sort of boy to live a long life. He voiced a thought appropriate to one who had lived a long time himself. Of course, Sebas had been created as an elderly man, so if one counted the time between his creation and the present, he would actually be younger than Climb. I suppose it would be much better for me to dispose of Sakurant. I hope they don't run into him. Sebas prayed to the 41 supreme beings for Climb's safety. If Sakurant was the strongest power in this facility, there was a good chance he would attack Sebas. But if he was acting as someone's bodyguard, he might focus on protecting his charge while trying to escape. Feeling a bit anxious, Sebas grabbed the knob and turned it. It moved a little, and then his hands stopped. Of course the door of an establishment like this would be locked. I am not very good at picking locks. There's no way around it. I'll have to pick it my way, Sebas murmured with chagrin and lowered his hips. He drew his right hand back, formed a striking edge with it, and held his left hand forward. It was a collected posture with a solid core, like the trunk of a 1,000-year cedar. What happened next seemed impossible. His arm pierced through the iron door through the hinge at that. It didn't stop there. It thrust farther and farther in, scraping along the wood and metal. The hinge screamed and bid farewell to the wall. Sebas casually opened the door that had lost all resistance. What the hell? Inside was a hallway. At the end of it, a large, bearded man stood outside a half-open door. He looked stupid, wide-eyed and agape. It was rusty, so I took the liberty of using a bit of force to open it. I recommend oiling your hinges, Sebas addressed the man as he closed the door. Well, it would probably be more accurate to say he stood it against the frame. As the man stood there completely stunned, Sebas moved unreservedly into the building. Hey, what's going on? What was that noise? From behind the man came other male voices, but the one looking straight at Sebas didn't respond and addressed the terrifying visitor instead. A welcome, the utterly bewildered man watched in a daze as Sebas approached him. As an employee in this sort of place, he was probably used to violence. Still, what he just witnessed was beyond the common sense he'd lived with his whole life. Ignoring his ally's questions, he smiled in an effort to appeal to Sebas. His survival instincts seemed to convince him that flattery would get him furthest. Or perhaps he was desperately trying to assure himself that Sebas was a butler in the service of one of their customers. The bearded man, cheeks twitching as he forced a grin, was not a pretty sight. Sebas smiled. It was a kind, gentle expression, but his eyes contained not the slightest hint of goodwill. Their glint was more like the mysterious, bewitching sparkle of a sword. Could you move, please? Bar boom, or maybe ga-bang. It was a stomach-turning sound. The robust, fully armed, grown man probably weighed a good 180 pounds. He flew to the side, spinning comically through the air at a speed human eyes could barely register. Then his body smashed into the wall with an impressive watery splat. The building shook as if it had been pounded by a gigantic fist. Shoot, he said. If I had killed him a bit farther in, he would have made a good barricade. Well, it seems there are others in the back. I'll just be more careful from here on out. Telling himself he'd better hold back, Sebas stepped around the corpse and continued down the hall. He opened the door wide, entered the room, and scanned it with elegance. He acted less like he was invading enemy territory, and more like he was taking a stroll through an empty house. Inside were two men. They were staring speechlessly at the crimson blossom staining the side of the hallway behind him. It took but a moment for the reek of organs, their contents, and blood to mix with the room's smell of cheap booze one would never find in Nazareth, and create a nauseatingly unpleasant aroma. Sebas consolidated the information he gathered from Tsuya and the assassins, and tried to recall the layout of the building. Tsuya's memories were in pieces. She didn't remember much, but she did say the real brothel was underground. The assassins had never been below, so their information wouldn't help him past this point. He looked at the floor, but he couldn't find the stairs leading down. Perhaps they were ingeniously hidden. If he couldn't find them himself, he simply needed to ask someone who knew. Excuse me, I have a question, Eeg. One of the men he addressed shrieked hoarsely. It suggested the option to fight was already out of his mind. That put Sebas at ease. It seemed like whenever he remembered Tsuya, he couldn't hold himself back and ended up doling out instant death. If they didn't want to fight, breaking both their legs would be plenty. The trembling men pressed themselves against the wall, trying to get even a little farther away from Sebas. Eyeing them emotionlessly, Sebas smiled with just his lips. Eeg, their terror intensified. The smell of ammonia filled the room. I guess I scared them a little too much. Sebas frowned. One of the men's eyes rolled and he crumpled to the ground. The extreme stress had caused him to lose consciousness. The other man looked enviously down at him. Sebas sighed. I mentioned I had a question. Actually, I have some business down below. Could you tell me how to get there? That as Sebas saw the fear in the man's eyes as he hesitated to betray the organization. The assassins had been the same way. It seemed they were afraid of being ejected from the organization. Recalling the behavior of the first man he met, the runaway he'd given money to, Sebas figured that must mean death. As the man faltered, Sebas ended his hesitation with a single remark. There are two mouths here, I don't necessarily have to hear it from yours. The man's forehead oozed sweat, and he shuddered. It's over there. There's a trapdoor, over there. Now that he knew, he saw scuffs on the floor in that area. Aha, I thank you. And now your role is done, Sebas smiled. The man understood the meaning behind his words. He turned pale and shivered. Still, he harbored a tiny flame of hope and put it into words. Please don't kill me, that one do. The room froze at the immediate reply. The man's eyes bulged a human expression of denial. But I talked, didn't I? Come on, I'll do anything, just spare me. That's true, but Sebas let out a breath that was part sigh and shook his head. No, you got to be kidding me. You can believe I am joking if you like, but there is only one outcome here. Oh God, Sebas remembered how Tsuya had been when he found her, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Someone who had contributed to something so horrible had no right to make entreaties to the gods. And to Sebas, the 41 supreme beings were the gods. He felt it was an insult to them. You reap what you sow. With those words of steel which cut off the discussion, the man sensed his impending death. Run. Fight. The moment the choice was thrust upon him, the man unhesitatingly elected to flee. He knew what would happen if he fought Sebas. If he ran, he had at least a sliver of a possibility of surviving. He was right to act as he did with those calculations. As a result, his life span lasted a few seconds, no, a few fractions of a second longer. He darted for the door, but Sebas caught up to him in an instant and lightly spun him around. A gust of wind rushed around the man's head, and his body collapsed like a rag doll. A sphere whapped against the wall, leaving a bloody splotch, and bounced to the floor. A beat later, the man's headless neck began flooding the ground with blood. It was the technique of a god. The roundhouse aimed specifically at the man's head. Its unbelievable speed and power were awe-inspiring enough on their own, but the most horrifying part was that the shoe on the foot he kicked with remained spotless. Heels clicking, he approached the man who had fainted and brought a foot down on him. Together with a sound like a dead tree snapping, his body convulsed. After several spasms, it stopped moving completely. If you think back on your actions up until now, it was only logical that this would happen, don't you think? But take peace of mind from the fact that you've compensated with your life. Sebas went to collect the corpses. The bodies were mutilated in horrible ways. He lined them up by the stairs to scare anyone trying to escape and make them think twice. That was the deterrent Sebas had thought up for the case where he wasn't able to destroy the entrance. After placing the corpses, Sebas stomped the trapdoor. With the sound of metal fittings breaking, the floor opened up. The broken door made an unexpected racket as it bounced and slid down the sturdily built stairs. I see if I destroy these stairs, then it will be impossible for anyone to escape this way. It wasn't a very big room. The sparsely furnished space contained a wardrobe and a bed, nothing more. The bed wasn't a humble affair of straw with a sheet over it, but a cotton-stuffed mattress. The frame was well made. It was like something a noble might use, but it favored function over form. It had no decorative elements whatsoever. On top of the frame sat a naked man. He was likely past middle age. His indolent physique was perhaps the aftermath of an insatiable appetite. Although his face might have been nearly average, it lost points for the sagging flesh on top of it. Anyone who saw him would describe him as a pig-like man. Pigs are by nature clever and charming animals who love beauty. But in this case, the image of the pig represented the word more insulting, meaning dim-witted, greedy, and unsanitary. His name was Staffan Hyvish. He pounded his raised fist down toward the mattress. The sound of flesh on flesh followed. An expression of delight appeared on Staffan's sagging face. Along with the sensation of the body warping under his hand, he felt something pleasurable creep up his spine. He shivered. Sticky red blood clung to his fist as he slowly brought it up. Staffan was on top of a naked woman. Her face was hugely swollen, and here and there, the skin was mottled from internal bleeding. Her nose was crushed. Blood had run from it and coagulated there. Her lips and eyelids were seriously inflamed. Her once pleasing features were now barely recognizable. The signs of internal bleeding on her body were not as bad as what had happened to her face. The sheets around the pair were discolored with blood. Until a little while ago, the woman had desperately held up her arms to shield her face. Now they flopped limply on the bed. Her hair was spread out over the sheets, making it look like she was floating in water. Hey, what's wrong? Done already? Huh? It didn't seem like she could possibly be conscious. Staffan raised his fist and brought it down. He slammed it into her cheek and the bone beneath it. Pain shot through his hand. He grimaced. That hurt, bitch. In his anger, he hit her again. The bed creaked and there was a splorting noise. The woman's skin, swollen like a ball, had popped, and he got blood on his fist. Fresh, thick red blood spattered the sheets, dyeing them crimson. Ugh. The woman no longer moved, even when she was struck. Her body barely responded. This beating was life-threatening. She was still alive not because Staffan was going easy on her, but because the mattress absorbed some of the shock. If she had been taking these blows on the hard floor, she probably would have died already. Staffan wasn't hitting with all his strength because he knew about the effects of the mattress. It was also because he knew that even if the woman died, it wasn't a problem. He could pay a certain amount for the disposal fee, and the matter would be considered settled. In fact, he'd already beaten several women to death at this establishment. Perhaps thanks to the dent in his pocketbook from those accumulating disposal fees, Staffan was unconsciously holding back a little. Gazing at the woman's body, which didn't so much as twitch, he licked his lips. This brothel was the best place to satisfy special kinks. In a normal brothel, this sort of thing would never be allowed. Well, maybe it would have been, but Staffan didn't know. It had been great when there were slaves. Slaves were assets. Those who used them roughly were viewed with disdain, in the same way people earn contempt for spending their fortunes in showy, wasteful ways. But for Staffan and others with peculiar fetishes, slaves were the quickest way to satisfy their lust. With that avenue taken from him, all Staffan could do was come to a place like this for relief. What would have become of him if he hadn't found out about this? Unable to bear the desire, he probably would have committed a crime and been imprisoned. He couldn't thank the noble his master enough for introducing him to this brothel, although in exchange he had to use his authority to do his master's illicit biddings. "I am grateful to you, master." There was a calm in his eyes. It might have been hard to believe considering his fetish and personality, but toward his master, and only his master, he was truly, deeply grateful. But a flame steadily grew in the pit of his stomach fury. The emotion he felt toward the woman responsible for the loss of slaves as an outlet for his desire. That little bitch. His face flushed with rage, and his eyes took on a bloody tinge. He saw the face of the princess he was supposed to be serving superimposed over the woman he was straddling. He concentrated the irritation building inside him. He hit her with his fist. The sound of flesh being pounded sent fresh blood flying. I wonder how amazing it would feel to crush her face. He punched the woman's face again and again. Perhaps a cut inside her mouth from the impact of his fist on a tooth caused a surprising amount of blood to flood out of her burst lip. Now she only twitched when he hit her. Few after the flurry of punches, Staffan's chest was heaving. His forehead and body were covered in an oily sheen of sweat. Staffan looked down at the woman beneath him. She looked past awful, even half dead. She was almost lifeless, like a puppet with broken strings. Staffan swallowed audibly. Nothing aroused him as much as sex with a woman beaten ragged. The more beautiful she was before the beating, the better. Nothing satisfied his sadistic hunger more than destroying beauty. How great would it feel to do this to her? He remembered the haughty face of the mistress of the house he visited earlier. She had a beauty equal to the princess, and the princess was said to be the loveliest woman in all the kingdom. Of course, he knew he'd never get to do anything with a woman like that. The only women who would satisfy his fetish were the ones who had fallen far enough in life to end up in this brothel. They were one step from being thrown away. For a woman that gorgeous, a noble would have to spend a fortune to buy her. He would have to keep her locked up in his domain so word of the sale wouldn't get out. I'd like to hit a woman like that someday. I'd like to beat her to death. How fun, how satisfying that would be. Needless to say, it was an impossible dream. He glanced at the woman beneath him. Her bare breast was moving faintly up and down. He curled his lips into a nasty smile. He clutched at her breasts, and they deformed to extremes under his grip. She didn't react at all. She was no longer in a state to register even excessive pain. The only difference between the woman beneath him and a doll was that she was soft. But Staffan found this lack of resistance slightly dissatisfying. "Help! Forgive me! I am sorry! Oh, stop!" He heard the woman's cries again in the back of his mind. Should he have fucked her while she was still screaming? Feeling a hint of regret, Staffan continued kneading her chest. Most of the women who ended up in this brothel were mentally absent. Their spirits were broken. Considering that, he could say the woman he'd been with today had been on the normal side. Was she like that too? The woman he recalled was Tsuya. He didn't want to know what fate the man who'd let her get away had met. But he couldn't hold back the sneer that came over his face when he thought of the butler he'd met at that mansion earlier. The woman had been fucked by many men. Possibly even some women and non-humans. How could she possibly be worth protecting? It was all he could do to not burst out laughing at how that butler had seemed ready to spend several hundred gold pieces on her. Now that I think of it, that runaway screamed nicely too. He sifted through his memories and recalled her shrieks. Yes, she'd been fairly normal for someone he'd been with at this brothel. Staffan grinned and moved to satisfy his animal desire. He grabbed the women's legs and spread them wide. He could see the bones in them, they were so thin, and his hands could wrap completely around them. He shifted himself into the space of her gaping nether regions. Then he grasped his member, now hard with desire, and he heard a click, and the door slowly opened. What the hell? When Staffan looked toward the door, there was an old man he'd seen somewhere before. He realized immediately who it was, the butler from that mansion. The old man Sebers strode casually into the room, his steps clicking against the floor.